Folks, welcome back to another video on Griftlands. Last time around, showcased some gameplay, introduced you to the world of Griftlands, great story-driven deck builder, and this time around I wanted to walk you through 5 tips that'll help you survive early in your journey through the Griftlands. I'd like to thank Clay for sponsoring this video and point you to the description to see more about Griftlands. You can check it out on Steam, see some of the overwhelmingly positive reviews this game has received so far. And while you're pulling that up, let's jump into some of the beginner tips I think you'll need for Griftlands. Tip number 1, balance is good. And I mean that in regards to balancing your build between a battle deck and a negotiation deck. If you didn't know, Griftlands essentially has 2 different combat systems. One is traditional fighting with punches and kicks and laser guns and hammers and lots of other fun things, and the other is a negotiation style of combat where it's really about talking to people and using your words and communication to advance the story or achieve your goals. And you have 2 separate decks with different cards and different mechanics for each of the 3 different characters that are going to play out in different ways across these 2 different kinds of combats: traditional, battle, and negotiation. Now, I'm personally like pretty gung-ho. I really like to fight it out. I like to go in swinging, but in Griftlands, sometimes it's nice to have your negotiation deck built up and have a game plan there, because it can help in certain scenarios. You might run into a quest that just has a negotiation and there's no fight option at all. And although losing the negotiation might not end your run like it would if you lost in a battle and actually your character died, can still be really beneficial and open up different options and really advance your run if you are able to go toe-to-toe with somebody in a negotiation. To be specific too, sometimes negotiations can make your life easier in future battles. So for instance, you might run into a boss where if you enter into a negotiation earlier, you can recruit some people to your side to help you out so that you have allies to fight against that boss. There's another example where you can use a negotiation to identify weaknesses of your opponent. Those can add bonuses into your deck when you enter into the battle against that opponent in the very near future. So there are both, real direct benefits from negotiations, but also, passive story-based ones as well, which means all in all, you can be more battle focused. You can run and gun like I like to do, but it's a good idea to have a little bit of balance and a semblance of an idea of what to do with your negotiation deck and support that with things like graphs and card choices and decisions perhaps that you make throughout the course of the story. So moving on to tip number 2, it's that more cards isn't always better. There is a tendency among new card game players in particular that's like, oh, I want every card. And I even find myself falling into this trap on occasion as well, where you think, oh, that card's awesome, it looks really powerful, I want that card, and I want that card, and I want that card. And before you know it, your deck just starts ballooning to include every single card that you're offered. But that's not a great thing, because what you really want to be doing in deck builders is refining your deck. You want your deck to be very synergistic. You want every card to complement another and all play towards a specific game plan. So you might have some particular mechanic or keyword that you're focused on, and grabbing cards that don't support that keyword or mechanic, when you draw those, they're going to be less impactful than if you would have drawn something else. And keep in mind, in Griftlands, you don't run out of cards. You just keep redrawing from the same deck over and over again. So you don't need an endless supply of cards. It's not like you're going to run out of options. You're just going to get the same cards added back into your draw pile and then begin to draw those again. So making sure that each draw is as impactful as possible and increasing the likelihood of finding those synergistic cards goes a long way. If you add a bunch of junk into your deck, whether that's your negotiation deck or your battle deck, it's going to cause more problems than it's going to help. On that note, you'll also see options sometimes throughout your run to remove cards from your deck, and you might have that same instinct, like, why would I want to remove cards? That's no good. But again, you can take cards that you don't need. Maybe you want to focus all on offense and remove some defensive cards. Maybe you just want to remove low-powered starter cards from your deck. That can also go a long way towards increasing that consistency of your draw and making your deck much more powerful. So basically, don't always take cards when you're offered them. If there's nothing that fits your game plan or doesn't seem to power you up, It's okay to decline them and just take that money instead. Money is good. So the next tip I have is a pretty simple one, but it can go a long way, and it's that you need to play all your cards. And that might sound kind of obvious, but you'll note that cards upgrade throughout the course of a run. Each time you play a card, it's going to have a little blue tick that ticks off, and certain cards will have, you know, after you play it 4 times, that card will upgrade. After you play it 8 times, whatever it is, that card will upgrade. And that means if you're in a fight and you're about to kill an opponent or win a negotiation and you have a couple spare actions left, you should play cards in order to increase those ticks and move closer towards upgrading your cards so that you upgrade them quicker in a run, you're more powerful sooner. That opens up more options, so on and so forth. If you leave unspent actions, that means your cards aren't going to upgrade as quickly. On top of that, you can also choose which cards perhaps to prioritize in certain scenarios where it's like, I only have a few actions left, I have an excess number of cards in hand, I really want to focus on upgrading these cards as soon as possible. So you can play those cards, give them preference essentially to upgrade them quicker than other cards you don't care as much about. So 2 ways essentially to slightly improve the speed and quality of your deck as soon as possible. Tip number 4 is that decisions matter. You might be used to certain deck builders out there where it's really gameplay focused and you're just kind of burning through the game as quickly as you can, and you're just slinging cards and you've got a pretty good feel for what your deck is doing and you're going as quick as you can. And maybe for, you know, any sort of story stuff, you're just kind of clicking through it to get to the gameplay. Well, I don't recommend that in Griftlands. Number one, the story is really good, so it's really well written, funny, well paced, there's cool stuff that happens, and the decisions you take throughout certain dialogue trees, throughout certain special events, can have really big impacts on how your run unfolds and frankly how powerful and impactful your character and your decks are going to be. So thinking ahead and thinking critically about how you're entering into certain decision trees and how you see a run going can have a big impact on how successful you'll be. For instance, maybe don't kill everybody all the time. It's a small decision, but I know my first Griftlands run, I was just a murderer and I killed absolutely everybody. I just executed instead of sparing lives. That can have some pretty big fallout as you realize people dislike you and hate you, and you get negative effects applied to your character. On the other side of things, if you take a careful road and make some good decisions, you might find some people love you, and that can have some big boons on your character too. So the 5th and final tip is a little bit more philosophical in nature, I guess, but it's that you shouldn't be afraid to take it easy in Griftlands. You know, we have a tendency as card game players to optimize and be perfectly mechanically skilled players and squeeze every last point of damage out of every last card, and there's certainly some strategically rewarding elements to that. It can be, a fun way to play and experience games. But for Griftlands in particular, I would encourage people to maybe slow down and back up a little bit and just play through the game once for story. And thankfully in Griftlands specifically, there is a story mode that makes the game much, much easier to play through. So, whether, you're just not quite that sharpened of a card game player yet, your skills aren't sharpened yet, or if you just want to take it easy and take it chill, see what the game is all about, maybe explore some of the different branching paths in replayability that exists in Griftlands, I would encourage you to check out the story mode. Don't feel like you got to ramp up the difficulty right away. Maybe you can save that for later once you've been through a story a couple times, seen the different paths you can take for a character, kind of understand the fights and opportunities that are going to come throughout the run. But taking that first easygoing run can go a long way, I think, towards improving your Griftlands experience overall as you start to dive into the replayability and optimization options that exist down the road. So there you go. Those are the 5 tips I have for, both getting the most out of Griftlands from a gameplay experience, but also, getting the most out of Griftlands from an enjoyment experience. I think there's a lot for this game to offer people of all different kinds of skill levels when it comes to card games. So if you're a beginner who is making the most out of these tips, that's awesome. Even if you're an expert though, hopefully you still got a little bit of a philosophical insight into the different ways you can enjoy and experience the Griftlands. That said, of course, again, I'd like to remind you, if you want to check out Griftlands, if this gameplay behind me intrigued you, if some of these tips got you excited to play the game, then you should hit the link down there in the description below. That'll take you to the Steam store. You'll see just how many people have purchased and love Griftlands. It is one of the highest rated deck builders out there, if not the highest rated. So I certainly encourage you to check it out. That said, thanks much for watching this video. Stay tuned for more Griftlands videos in the future. But until then, game on.